Hey there, y'all. My name is Crystal Witten. I'm here today to tell you about how I do my sermon notes for church, and it's just such a great way to keep you focused and so your mind doesn't wander and thinking about your grocery list and stuff like that. So follow along and hopefully you'll be able to pick up some fun things. Okay, so first of all, here is what I take to church with me. I have my Bible, and then I have a small little notebook. This is a Lichterm 1917. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's just a blank page notebook. The pages are semi-smooth, and so it's just flexible and easy to take along with me in my purse. There's all kinds of notebooks that you can take. Another one that I've used in the past is a Moleskine. And this is a Moleskine notebook. They come either lined or with the dot grids, or I think a regular grid or blank. And so I've gone with the blank so far, and it's been good. And again, it's thin, it's easy to throw in your purse. And then I also have my brand new Crystal Witten notebooks that have just come in, and on the inside it is a dot grid kind of thing so that you can have straight lines when you want them, but it's pretty light, so it's not very obvious or obtrusive. And so again, just something lightweight that you can put in your purse and carry around with you to church. And then my favorite pen that I always talk about is the Tombow Funisuki Japanese calligraphy pen. It's a brush pen. Hard tip is the one that I like. I feel like it's such a great pen for beginners, but I use it for just about everything. So that is what I go to church with on a Sunday morning. People always ask me if I do it in a pencil first, and the answer is no. I do it with this pen live in real time. I know that there are some people who do it in pencil first and then they come back with a pen later on. I just don't have the time for that, and so it's been kind of a nice challenge for myself to see if I can fill 2 pages during a sermon. There are certainly times where I don't finish. Maybe it was a shorter sermon, or I just didn't get the last point, or whatever. So it's certainly not a perfect art, but it is a nice challenge. And so what I say is that in order to do sketchnoting or creative note taking, you need a pen and some paper and then a good dose of imperfection, because listen, you will make mistakes when you do this, but it is okay. You don't need to get all caught up or worried about that. This is just kind of for you. It's a fun creative challenge, and so mistakes are going to be made. You should just go into it with that expectation from the very beginning, and then that way you won't be disappointed, right? So here are some of the main things that I try to get down with each sermon in church: is the speaker's name, the date, and then the main passage that they're preaching from. And then if there's a title, I'll put the title down too. Not all pastors will title every sermon, but if there is one or a main theme, then I will try to get that there at the top. All right, now I want to show you the different elements that I use in all my sermon notes. Of course, all your notes will look different because every sermon is different, but I do tend to use the same kinds of elements, because that helps you go quickly when you have sort of a memory bank worked up of different things that you're going to use. So the first one is lettering. I will use simple lettering styles. I don't get very ornate, mainly because you don't want to get bogged down in your drawing and in your lettering. You got to move quickly. So I have a few styles that I can do pretty easily, pretty quickly, depending on the day. Some days aren't as smooth as others, but the first one is calligraphy. And with my Tombow, I can get those thicks and thins there to do some calligraphy. Another style is more of a straight, skinny style, all caps, and that's easy to do quickly. Sometimes I will give it a little bit of thickness in the down strokes with my pen, like that. I don't worry so much about being completely straight or perfect. This is supposed to look very organic. And then I'll also sometimes do kind of a serif, maybe a little bit wider or something, but where I give it the little serifs on the ends of each letter just to kind of change it up a little bit. And I'm going quickly here. I'm not used to having a desk with me whenever I do sermon notes. You're kind of balancing your notebook on your lap. And then whenever you kind of get used to the certain lettering styles that you're going to use, you can also mix and match them. So, you know, I might do one word in calligraphy like this, and then the next word below it is more spread out and straight. Now I am left-handed, and I do deal with some smearing and left-handed problems sometimes. That's okay. You just kind of keep on going and don't worry about little mess-ups like that. The next element that I use are containers. So containers help divide your letters. I mean, not your letters, your different thoughts, and kind of section everything off so you can, you know, put something in a square with a, you know, quote in there. Obviously a circle. A lot of times I'll do the little like cloud bubbles around something because those are easy to kind of manipulate based on what the quote was. Just anything you can think of. If you want to do a speech bubble, you could do something like that. I like to do banners. So often I will have something like that, or, you know, like that, kind of different banners that have either a full quote in it, or maybe just to set apart a word of some kind. Let me show you some examples here in my notebook. So here's kind of a different little banner. I don't do that kind very often. Here's the little, you know, bubble cloud sort of thing. I just fit it around that quote. So I would like write that quote out first and then put the bubble around it. Same here, and I gave it a little shadow to give it some different depth or whatnot. Here's a square, doubled up. Let's see what's over here. Here's a banner kind of thing. So you can see the different containers and how they're used. Sometimes you just put one word in it. Sometimes, you know, we're putting a reference in it, that kind of thing. So that's an example. And the third element that I use often are dividers or lines. And that also helps to kind of separate the different thoughts or the different points that you want to make if you want just an easy way to separate things. So you could do a line with some dots in it, and then another line. You could do a zigzag. You could do a series of dots. You could do kind of like a curly Q line, like that. You could do something like a bracket. Like that. Maybe a dashed line. Kind of come up with, you know, some of your own things that you like that you would want to incorporate in your notes. So those are just some examples. I also will use arrows. And a lot of times, because I don't have time to do anything real elaborate, I want to connect 2 points. You know, I want to connect point A to point B, or one thought to another thought, and maybe I have a quote. Let me see. Here, you know, I want to connect these two things, but I didn't have room to put them next to each other, just with the way that I was going and creating. So, you know, I will use an arrow to connect So a lot of times it'll just be something like this, little curly Q with a pointer on it, or you could do an open shape arrow like that, and maybe give it some dashed lines on the inside or put dots on the inside or something. If you have time and you want to draw something a little bit more interesting, you know, you could do something like that. I don't know. Let your imagination go and don't overthink it too much. So arrows. The next element that I like to use a lot are just some common doodles. And it's kind of different depending on what the sermon's about. If it's a Christmas time sermon, maybe I will do a Christmas tree or holly leaves or something like that. So you could always add flowers or a laurel wreath or something like that. But you know, if it's a mission-based sermon, then I may try to draw a world, and by no means is it an accurate world of like what it really looks like, but most of the time if you draw some funny looking shapes inside a circle and you shade them in, people know that, you know, that's supposed to be a globe. So that's one thing that you can do. And so, you know, one thing you can do to practice would be to kind of come up with a memory bank of different doodles that you might use in your sermon notes. You know, a cross, bread, like Jesus is the bread of life, you know, what else? A shield. And I will tell you too that I'm kind of known to grab my phone and look on Google during a sermon if I want to, you know, see, well, how do you draw a sheep or something like that. I will sometimes Google that during the sermon just so that I can get my doodle looking right. Or if you don't want to do that, but you want to leave a little spot in your notes for it, then you could always come back later and do it. But maybe a clock, if you're talking about time. Let's see what else. Maybe a sword. You don't have to get super elaborate. I'm not the best illustrator. You may be a lot better than me. I don't usually spend a whole lot of time on my doodles, but just something that you could work on if you want to practice this would be coming up with a series of drawings or things that you can add into your lettering just to give it a little bit more interest and make it look just a little different. So let's see what examples I have to show you. Here's a Bible. Doodles are usually like the last thing I think of because I'm so focused on the words and the banners and things that a lot of weeks I'll get by without a whole lot of doodles. Let's see. I know I had some at Christmas time. Here, like a wreath. And there you can see a different kind of container too. It's this like jagged kind of thought bubble or whatever. Let's see what else for doodles. There's another Christmas sermon. Oh, a scroll. A fish hook. So just a little idea there. I think that was supposed to be an altar. So yeah, doodles. That would be one of the things. And then one of my favorite elements, is filler. So people always ask me, how do you get your notes to be completely full, the whole page? And the answer is sometimes it works out really easily and sometimes it doesn't, because maybe the sermon was short or maybe I didn't have as many points to write down and I have a lot of open space, and it just looks kind of nice to fill in a lot of that empty space. And so I will use filler, and there's different kinds of things, but sometimes I can do this in service and sometimes I'll do it later, at home or when I'm looking back over it. But hash marks are one kind of filler. If you have a pencil with you, or if you want to use the side of your pen, you can kind of give it a shading for filler. You could just do simple lines like that. You could do a bunch of dots, which kind of takes a little while, but you start kind of tight and then you start to space them out a little bit so it kind of has a speckled shaded look. Another thing you could do for filler is the little like dashed lines coming out from one of the containers, maybe something you want to highlight, and that takes up space. And then another one would be some kind of flourish like that. Those kinds of things can fill in the spaces. Basic elements to sketchnoting, and it's really just all about writing down what you hear and kind of putting these things together. I've been doing this for about 2 years now, which is just crazy to believe for me. But I did want to tell you to be gentle with yourself, because when I first started, I felt like I had to write down every single thing that the pastor said, but you quickly just cannot keep up with that. And so it can be frustrating. Really what you want to do is just try to get down a lot of the main thoughts in the beginning, and not feel like you have to write every single thing. The main quotes, the main points, the scriptures, those kinds of things. And if it helps you to keep a little notepad on the side or a note on your phone where you type in a verse or something that you want to remember, but you're kind of in the middle of another thought, sometimes it's nice to keep a little scratch pad or something next to you. Finally, the order that you do it in is up to you. I've tried before to do systematic columns where I start left and go right. A lot of times I will try to get my points together if it's 1, 2, 3, 4. But a lot of times, it's just more of a popcorn back and forth around the page wherever things kind of feel like they're gonna fit. And then I draw arrows and things to connect the different thoughts or to give an order to it. I did want to show you where I use some color for the filler, just to give it some different interest or whatever. The opportunities and the options are limitless. It's really up to your own creativity. There's really no right or wrong way. So I encourage you to just try it and see what you like or see what you think. I do have a chapter on this in my book Faith in Lettering called Creative Sermon Notes, which just goes into a little bit more detail of what we talked about today with a few other tips and things like that. So you can check it out if you're interested.